Hey guys, how you doing? This is going to be a difficult video because I am committed to doing a self-critique of the left. It's something I've been thinking about a lot, and now the opportunity has really uh, jumped to the forefront. Jimmy Dore went ahead and did an interview with a member of the Boogaloo Boys. His name evades me at the moment, but you can go see that on YouTube. Real easy to find. And this has really blown up leftists throughout the internet and has really, in my view, shown off a lot of the um, moral purity critiques, let's say. One of the things that I think the left gets critiqued for a lot, and it is right that they are critiqued along these lines, is that leftists have difficulty organizing and they have difficulty creating movements because they're more focused on moral purity instead of actually organizing and actually putting together coalitions of allies. Uh, and this is a flaw of the left. And this is where I land without a doubt, and it's something that we need to resolve if we are going to actually successfully create long-lasting organizations, right? And it's something that we need to address. I was about to say in our membership, but there's no membership. We're just people who are trying to do this, and I think that's what gets forgotten in these conversations, is that we're all just people trying to work something out, trying to work out this very difficult, very complex, very dense issue of how do we find peace. And Jimmy Dore acts as a lightning rod for this because his popularity on YouTube doesn't come from his knowledge or his popularity or his understanding of social issues, or even really his understanding of politics. Even though I think he does have a fairly decent grasp on politics, it comes from the fact that he's an everyman, right? And one of the things that I think is this unsettles leftists, especially the moral purists on the left, that Jimmy Dore's popularity isn't coming because he is a well-informed, well-articulated, well-argued individual. It comes from the fact that people sympathize with him because he is an everyman. And in this Boogaloo Boys interview, Jimmy Dore, everyman, right, just like regular guy you're going to find at a bar, because that's usually where he would be if it wasn't for these lockdowns, decides to have an open public conversation, right, with a group that has been that calls themselves libertarian. Okay, and let me be very, very clear on one very specific point. American libertarianism is a dangerous ideology. I think that people on the left are correct about pointing this out. And I'm genuinely not interested in having a conversation or a debate along those lines in this framework of the critique of moral purity, because I accept that American libertarianism is a dangerous ideology. It certainly leads people towards fascism. It certainly leads down that path. It doesn't. It is an enormous concession to corporate power, right? Deregulated capitalism is really what the libertarian movement in the United States is. And deregulated capitalism is just a monster. It's just a total demon. And so I'm not going to, I'll completely concede that point without the shadow of a doubt. But there is this idea amongst the left that, first of all, that the people who are involved in this Boogaloo Boys movement or the libertarian movement at large are aware that that is what they are arguing for, that they are arguing for total secession to corporate power, right? But then there is also, the moral purity argument comes from, we shouldn't even be having conversations with these people, right? That's that's a consistent thing that comes up on the left, and I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong, because in my view, uh, it shows a weakness on our part. And don't get me wrong, the left is weak. We are like socialists and communists do not have power. We are very weak, uh, which means it's even more important that when we're speaking on these issues and when we're listening to people, uh, uh, we do so and we approach them with compassion, empathy, and with a spirit of forgiveness. Because a man like Jimmy Dore, who's not that well read, who does not know the history of the libertarian movement in the United States, like without a doubt, right? He is mainly just interested that there's this armed militia group that has been kind of castigated as the far right, that has been deplatformed, something he's concerned about for himself personally, and I can respect that. Uh, and he wants to talk to them and he wants to learn more about them, right? And so he's going to learn more about them by going and talking to them. Uh, and in my view, this is healthy. This is a good thing to do because he talks to them, and then that gives the leftists an opportunity to respond. Okay? So when a like kind of a middle of the road average man goes and has a conversation with somebody who is on the right, and especially on the far right, this is an opportunity for leftists to stand up and go, okay, you had that conversation. Here's the things. This is what we wish you had have said. This is what we wish you had have asked. These are the questions that we wish you had have brought. But the left has this spirit with it at the moment where it wants to seek to deplatform, and it wants to silence, and it wants to insult and belittle. These are not attitudes that the average population wants to tolerate right now. Like this is a losing strategy. This is really where I'm landing. Okay, this idea that we need to that if Jimmy Dore goes out and has a conversation with the Boogaloo boys, that makes him a dumb idiot that we need to castigate. That's a losing strategy, right? That only alienates ourselves from the wider body. Because here's here's the reality, guys. Capitalism is very popular. Capitalism's not very popular. Fascism is very popular. Fascist ideology exists in our society in many ways. Like the most insidious one, in my view, is like the hero narrative, right? The idea that we can just wish and manifest stuff to happen in our lives because we want it to happen. You just focus on it. You go for the prize, all this kind of stuff. And for God's sakes, Oprah talks about that. That's the secret, right? It's deeply entrenched in the hero narratives that comes out of fascist ideology, right? And it's much more difficult to humble yourself before an almighty universe that seems sort of senseless and winding. It's much easier to believe in the idea that, okay, well, the problem is I'm not focusing enough on my prize, right? It's difficult to admit that we don't have control over lots of things and that we can just get wiped out. And ultimately, like, Jimmy Dore's position is he's very concerned that there's going to be a civil war in his country. And he is going to do everything he can to try to prevent that. And that includes negotiating with the enemy, right? That includes going out and trying to listen to these people. And if the left continues to play, like, the person who came right after Jimmy Dore, right after this Boogaloo boy, was a socialist who's doing great work. Of course, I forget his name right now, but was a socialist who immediately played the moral purity card, who immediately was like aghast that Jimmy Dore even had this fellow on. And of course, Jimmy Dore is coming at it from just the everyman position. Why shouldn't I be able to talk to this guy? What's so wrong? And the real example, like, so this fellow says, like, oh, the Boogaloo boys, they go to anti-mask protests. And here's, like, the perfect example of a moral purity position, right? Like, I don't agree with anti-mask protests. I think that anti-mask protests and like anti-lockdown protests are wrong. But I simultaneously understand that like people are scared, desperate, they're losing their livelihoods, and they're pinning it on these lockdowns. When really what they need to be focusing on is that capitalism as a system has failed them. But no one is articulating that to them. They're not surrounded by those people because the socialist movement and the communist movement is so weak at the moment. And if we approach those people who are acting out of a place of desperation, they're scared, they don't know who to turn to, they don't know what to do. All they know is that there are lockdowns happening and they're losing their livelihood for it, so they're going to complain about it, right? And if the people who do have the knowledge of what is actually happening, like anti-capitalists, communists, and socialists, treat them like garbage, call them deplorables, roll their eyes and shit on them for acting out of their fears, then we're going to be alienated, right? We're going to be separated from the group. No one's going to pay attention to us, even while we have the moral high ground. Because you can't simultaneously have the moral high ground and insult people and then expect them to go along with you, right? With that said, here's a little moment. Pug, 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 pug. Oh, he's got a little peanut butter on his chin. He's got a little peanut butter on his chin. It's always good to have a pug break. Pug, pug break. That's for the people who stuck around past the 5-minute mark. Congratulations. You get a pug. So we can approach people like Jimmy Dore, and we can approach like centrists, liberals, moderates, like people who are in the population. We can approach, or apolitical people. We can approach them with, and we have to approach them with more patience, more understanding, because they don't know, right? They don't know things that we know, right? They don't know, they haven't done the research. They haven't looked forward to it. They haven't embedded their lives in the news and in political theory, right? And to expect them to do so is itself insane. Like, they're not going to do that. They have lives to live. They have children to raise. They have jobs to do, right? Like and when they raise concerns, or when they talk to people who are kind of political opposition, like libertarians are to communism and socialism, we have to be very patient. And it's not fair. It's not fair that we have to be the bearers of truth while simultaneously being very patient, and to be in this weak position that we're in, and to have to be calm and selective in our outrage, and selective in how we move forward. But we have to. We have to, because right now there are huge swaths of Americans and Canadians who are looking at groups like the Boogaloo Boys, who are looking at far-right militia groups and things like this, and going like, and looking at them and taking them seriously, because no one else is talking to them. This is what happened with QAnon. No one else is talking to these guys, right? If you take a group and you attempt to silence them, and you attempt to put them up on the fringes, right, and you don't talk to them, and then they're just going to continue radicalizing people who you refuse to talk to. And if you refuse to talk to people based on these very thin moral purist lines, without accepting that people are malleable, people are complex, people contradict themselves all the time, people are contradictory figures. That's part of being an existential being in the world. Like, if you don't approach people with that kind of desire to seek connection and compassion, then they're going to just drop you. And frankly, they're right to do so. Like, we have something to sell. And what we have to sell is a better future. But if that better future is like, these guys are just dumb idiots, that doesn't look like a better future, does it? Like, you can't. And let me be very specific, right? I'd like to be really clear on one point. this is how we should treat our potential allies. We do have enemies, right? We do have like radically evil, chaotic Death Knight enemies, without a doubt. But they're CEOs and billionaires and elected officials, people who have legitimate and actual power. The Boogaloo Boys do not have legitimate and actual power, right? They're kind of scary because they are libertarians and they are this kind of far right movement. So there's kind of a scary element to that, without a doubt. But they themselves have no power, and they see, and what confuses people like Jimmy Dore when they are looking, when he is looking at the left, is like, aren't you guys interested in the same things? Aren't you guys interested in eliminating the corporate power structure, in eliminating the oligarchs, in overthrowing this illegitimate government? Aren't you guys allied on the same things? And he is aghast that leftists get caught up on moral purist points, right? And here's what's real. And if you disagree with what I'm saying, well, too bad, because what's real is that most of America thinks this way, right? Fascism is popular. It's embedded in the culture. We're in a position of weakness. We cannot afford to alienate our allies. We can and we cannot afford to alienate our allies, even when we think they're making desperate mistakes. And if you don't think that Jimmy Dore is at least a potential ally of the left, then we are way deeper, like you're way deeper down the rabbit hole than you think you are, right? You're like well secluded. You're well cloistered out. Jimmy Dore is an everyman. He represents an enormous section of the American populace. His popularity comes from the fact that he is just a normal dude attempting to find truth. And he's willing to put himself out there and make bold proclamations, which he's willing to come down from. And if we take a more forgiving posture of him, and if we take a more straight line position of instead of resorting to kind of personal attacks and cynical characterizations and demonizations of him, then that's how you make inroads, right? That's how you make inroads. Do you think that Jimmy Dore is going to be willing to have socialists on his podcast if we call him stupid every single time he talks to somebody who we disagree with, right? Like, that's not going to happen. And we only hurt ourselves and we only hurt our own movement by doing that. What we should be focusing on right now is like disagreeing. You can disagree with the libertarians, right? And then teaching why we disagree, teaching what we stand for and what it is we do. And most importantly, like someone like Jimmy Dore, I don't think actually has a pretty good grasp of what socialism or communism actually is, right? And that's something that could be explained to him. That's something that and through explaining that to Jimmy Dore, we could be explaining that to millions and millions and millions of Americans, right? Imagine going on a podcast as popular as Jimmy Dore and saying that what we need to do is transfer the shares away from the billionaire class and into the hands of the working people. That's my position. We need to eliminate capitalism at its root. Imagine saying that on Jimmy Dore's podcast. But a man like me, or a person like many of the podcasters or leftists that I see, they're never going to end up on that show. They're never going to end up having those conversations if every single time someone like Jimmy Dore wants to explore inroads with other groups, or ask questions that get into difficult weeds, we insult him. It's just not going to work. Like, it's just not going to work. And what's so frustrating from my perspective on this is that there are many extremely intelligent, well-articulated, well-meaning, well-researched, socialists and communists online right now with growing communities, as I am attempting to grow my community, right? Who are doing everything they can to ensure that they alienate themselves from the wider populace, because they take the left takes its position of moral superiority, and the left is morally superior in many, many, many ways, uh, and then insults those who don't adhere to whatever that individual believes to be morally pure at the time. And so this is how the left eats itself, because I'm a leftist, right? And if another leftist and I have a disagreement, we should be able to walk away from that disagreement feeling as though we articulated our points, said what we wanted to say, and then if we come to the end of the conversation, we can look at one another and go, okay, I disagree with you. We can agree to disagree and move on. But that's not what happens on the left, right? That leftists cut each other off. The cancel culture is real, right? Leftists work to ignore, dismiss, and then insult each other in public and openly, and work and fight against one another. And so it's no wonder we're so weak, right? And so what we need to do is just learn on a very basic level that humans are humans. Like, I know that sounds very dumb, but that's kind of the point. Humans are humans. We're very complex, difficult creatures who we don't like. An individual does not necessarily understand themselves, let alone other people, let alone political theory. And we are in a position now where we can be teachers and we can be informing people and we can be educating people. But we have to do it with us. And we have to do this, guys. Like, we have to do this. We have to do this with a spirit of forgiveness for those who we feel stumble into the weeds, while simultaneously, like, it's okay to caution people. It's okay to throw up the signs and be like, okay, like, here's the caution, here's what history says, here's what this and the other thing says, without calling them dumb or assuming that they are cynical or bad actors, right? And there's a lot of anger on the stage right now. And we can either choose to feed that anger and to turn that anger upon ourselves and destroy our own movements internally through this process of alienation that I'm describing right now, based on moral purity, or we can be more compassionate, forgive people, listen to our enemies, and then respond to them. One of the most powerful documents that was ever made during the anti-slavery movement in the United States was a book that I have right now that should be taught in schools. Ninth graders should learn it, called Cotton is King. And this is a collection of essays that was written by pro-slavery advocates, right? It's a horrendous document. It's horrific. But if it wasn't written, it couldn't be responded to. And when Jimmy Dore goes out and has an interview with the Boogaloo Boys, right, he sets himself, but also the culture up for a conversation and a response. And if the Boogaloo Boys actually are as horrific as leftists believe, then we should be able to make that argument and we should be able to put that forward. And while we're doing it, we should look good, right? And that's really what it comes down to, right? It's a very bad PR move. It's a very bad look to go after your potential allies, or your allies, period. Even when you think that your potential allies or your allies are doing something wrong, right? It's a very bad look, especially on the personal attack level, that kind of thing. because it discredits your own movement. Even if you're right. Even if you're right, it discredits your own movement. And people will shy away from you if you look at people who essentially have no power. Like Jimmy Dore doesn't really have, like, he has a lot of power from the leftist perspective, but Jimmy Dore doesn't have power. Like Jimmy Dore, he's screaming at the top of his lungs because he understands just on a moral basis in the core of who he is that something has gone wrong, and he's trying to work it out. Just like millions and millions of Americans and millions of people across the globe are trying to figure it out, right? And we need to accept that, like, if the next fellow on that socials had said it to Jimmy Dore, oh, Jimmy, the guy who before me, he was a Boogaloo guy, eh? Like, you understand that I'm opposed to the Boogaloo boys just on an ideological basis, right? That libertarianism is a deregulated capitalist system that ultimately does lead to fascism. But instead of that, we got like a moral purity kind of, oh, the Boogaloo boys, they went to anti-mask rallies and all this kind of stuff. And instead of it being a teaching moment, it ends up being a moment where we get to kind of play the moral high road. And people hate that. Like, they just hate that. Right? They do. And so I got to end this video because I'm running out of time. And I'll end it with like a little pug love. Little pug love. Little pug love. Little pug love. Hi, little pug love. Oh, he's just looking at his peanut butter. He eats all he wants. We got to be nicer. We got to be more forgiving. We got to be more empathetic. People make mistakes. People get into weeds while believing they're doing the right thing. And we can always learn from these moments. And the people who are willing to engage and willing to put themselves out there, we should be encouraging them to do so. Because that is how the conversation happens. And while the conversation is happening, it's going to be messy. It's going to look stupid, because that's humanity for you. It's going to, we're going to get into all kinds of dumb weeds. We're going to get into all kinds of dumb scenarios. And if we, as the leftists, the communists, and the socialists, don't do everything we can in order to forgive, in order to have empathy, in order to have compassion, in order to show people in our physical beings and who we are that communism and socialism is a superior system and leads to more empathetic, compassionate, loving people on a one-to-one basis. If we're not willing to do that and show people that just in who we are, then we're going to lose this, right? We will be alienated. We will be castigated. We will be discarded. Because no one wants to join up with a bunch of people who are kind of sucking and whining about it. Sorry. Like, that's kind of what it comes down to. Just learn to forgive. That's what we need to be doing right now. We need to learn as a culture how to forgive, because we've obviously forgotten. Okay. This is a long one. I'm pretty happy with this one. I recorded this 3 times. I finally did it, I think. So like, share, subscribe, guys. Hit all the bells. Hit all the whistles. Like button right below. Free to do. Bing. Hits the algorithm. If you made it to this point, honestly, just subscribe. If you're not a subscriber, just subscribe. This is a growing channel. I'm hoping to get it bigger and bigger. Once I get to 1,000 members, I can actually start monetizing it and try to make this my full-time job. And hey, if you really want to make this my full-time job, if you listen to me and think like, boy, here's a guy who I need to support, just throw $1 my way. It's down in the description, just my Patreon. $1 it's a Timmy's coffee, costs absolutely nothing, but it goes a long way to helping me out. Okay, guys. I love you all. Go have a smoke. Go have a drink. Lord knows I'm going to. Good luck out there. We're going to need it.